Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're looking at another installment of the weekly metagame breakdown for the Timeless Best of 3 format. We're going to be looking at the top performing ladder decks up to Mythic rank, and we're going to be getting the data from Untapped GG, what you see on the screen, companion tool that aggregates user win rates, tracks your collection, a whole bunch of stuff like that. It puts it all together, gives us some stats in terms of the breakdown of the meta, as well as the individual deck list. I will say, so we had an alchemy drop last week, I think it was. Nothing like overtly powerful for the timeless format, I would say. But sorry. There's not a huge amount of games played for the last week. From platinum to mythic rank, it was 6,100, best of 3 games, and from diamond or 6,200, and it was 3,100 from diamond and mythic. So not a huge sample that we're going to be looking at today, and we kind of see that in just terms of wasn't really a huge impact in terms of like recent mythic players. If we look at like best of 1, for example, there's some more details in terms of the breakdowns that we're getting this week. But for best of 3, not like massive amount. Even for the popularity, it's really just the Dimir deck showing up. So we're going to kind of skip the popularity of the week. We'll just jump into the data. Like I said, we got 3,100 matches played, diamond and mythic rank for the last week, the 15th through to the 23rd-ish, so just the start of the new meta. And we're going to jump in. Boros Energy with Flage Companion is the highest win rate. So this one here is got some new, or not newer, but kind of changes in terms. We're seeing the main board Blood Moon. One Ring has been adopted largely by a lot of the modern decks. Basically just paying the best cards in Modern Horizons 3 plus Lord of the Rings kind of jam together. You'll have the Aether Hubs in here to help you more consistently cascade into Blood Moon or Flage. And this provides you some more sustained card advantage. Only a single copy of Goblin Bombardment, which is notable, but you still have like your Johnny package, your energy package of 1-drops, Static Prison, as well as Swords to Plowshare 4-2 split. So a little bit softer to show and tell in the main, but Blood Moon can mess with their mana as well. You have the Arena Glory Flage combo to push out huge amounts of damage out of nowhere. Sideboard. Interesting sideboard configuration here. Regavans in the side. So against slower decks, control decks, stuff like that, you can bring in the Regavans, puts pressure on them that way there. Sometimes where like Flage might be contested with a good graveyard hate, or the ring might be too slow and you want to close the game out a little faster. You have Static Prison has more removal, Vexing Bauble, Rolling Vortex, really good against Show and Tell. I would probably bring in Vortexes against the control decks as well. Then License Hearst for Graveyard Hate. From there, we go to Show and Tell, 80%, 25 games. So this list here, we're seeing a couple Thoughtseize main. The only tutor is the Mastermind's Acquisition in the main, no Fae of Wishes. And this one's on the full set of Leyline of Sanctity in the main as well. So this gets around the Johnny pings, Bombardment pings. It gets checks against Thoughtseize style effects as well. So the combo is you Masterminds into your sideboard. You get Approach the Second Sun, and then you dig to find it. This one's not fully deterministic. Sometimes you'll have Masterminds into fetch something in the side to like get back your copies to kind of rebuy and guarantee it. So this does require you to have some additional dig in that. It does free up more sideboard slots, hand hate, protection effects, removal against a lot of the hate pieces. Born Upon the Winds can win through things like Rolling Vortex triggers, Bowmaster triggers, Shielder triggers, stuff like that. Mana Drain as just some more counters. When you want to shift, just become a little bit more controlling. Corrosive Grip for the mirror, along with. You also have the Shifting Woodlands, which can become a copy of Omniscience, so it gives you kind of a backdoor show and tell combo. Then have Orzhov Vampires, so 75%. So Dark Ritual is a hell of a card. Dark Ritual into Sorin, into Saint Alenda, or Vein Ripper is kind of a turn 1 combo. You also have the ability to evoke Grief or Troll, and then you have Reanimate to buy those back. No Ephemerate in this version here. 1 ring for grind advantage. Notably only 1 Necro and offsetting it with 1 rings. Temporary lockdown for like all the energy decks. Cheap interaction. Witch Enchanter is a nice land that can also deal with like Goblin Bombardment, Show and Tell. So it's kind of an interesting piece in the main. But turn 1 Saint Alenda is a hell of a card to try to race. Fatal Push, more cheap removal, along with the Fragment, Surgical for graveyard hate, kind of combo hate, Bowmaster against like the more control-y decks, Path to Peril against the aggressive decks, along with temporary lockdown. We then go to Dimir, and this is Dimir Control, but not Luris. So this one's an interesting one. For a second, I thought it was Tainted Pack, just seeing the 1-ofs, but we got some 2-ofs. We have Jace, the Mind Sculptor Fox. So interesting to see this card see play in this format, just given that repeated brainstorms into a Bowmaster format's a little particular, like, you're gambling a bit. There's enough interaction, hopefully, in this deck to prevent you from getting stuck, but you have the engine of your own Bowmasters, Psychic Frogs, One Snap, the Oculus in here, Brazen Borer. We're seeing a new card from Alchemy, Razor Demon, 3 mana, 7/7 flying, discard a card. When you cast it, your opponent drafts a card from the Demon spellbook. It's Demonic Pact, the enchantment that gives them 4 modes, one of them being lose the game. The 6 mana card, they get to cast for free, that reanimates 2 things from their graveyard, and then it's Scheming Symmetry that they can exile the top 13, and then put a card in hand. So I've been playing like this in Historic with like Oculus and a Self Mill with Unearth. So you could kind of play that strategy. So it's kind of got the Unearth theme, these big threats, and then just like some control elements, Sorin's Ransom, Loring Revealed, Dig Through Time. It's interesting one of selections here. I just wonder like some of the deck. Flusterstorm as a counter for Storm or kind of combo piece decks. Inquisition as hand hate, cheap counter spells, non-creature, creature, Flute for activated abilities, kind of tax, Meat Hook as a sweeper, Harbinger as kind of that Blood Moon style effect for non-basics. You can kind of punish them that way. Dispute as cheap sweeper, Leyline of the Void for graveyard hate, and Path to Peril as a cheap sweeper. You then go to Mardu Energy. So the Luris version's usually a little bit tighter. So we see them actually going back to Amulet, which is interesting. This one's at 70%. As kind of that card advantage engine over the Juggernaut Peddlers in the main. Only one Nightmare, but seeing some copies of Deathrite Shaman. So a different way to kind of attack your opponent's graveyard. Get you some utility, kind of that mini Planeswalker effect. Stomping Grounds, Temple Gardens as green sources to gain you life in the deck. Which is another way to also trigger Osseil's Pride without having to attack. Otherwise, it's fairly similar to the other energies. Static Prison is more removal, along with swords. Juggernaut Peddlers, Thoughtseize effect, Sun Cleanser for the Mirror, Thraben Charm as we're just a really flexible card. It can be removal, it could be enchantment, destruction, it could be graveyard hate, all mixed into one card. So it keeps your graveyard kind of flexible. There's another Boros Energy deck that I want to share that's got some interesting choices. We see a Jolly Balloon Man as kind of a, the flip side of Fable, but it's not as good because it's not the exact creature. It's a 1/1, so you lose some utility. Same kind of sack effect. This also costs 1 to animate, so you kind of lose that effect. But you have Arabella in here. This one plays nicely with going wide with the Osseil's Pride. You can do huge chunks of damage. Arena, glorying it out, can also help with big life swings. So some interesting choices want to highlight of what people are trying. Obviously, this one has a little bit lower of a win rate than the other version, where you're just kind of jamming Flages, Blood Moons, all that. But if you want to try out some new cards, this is what we're trying. A lot of the same sideboard considerations, Containment Priest against anything trying to cheat creatures in play, whether it be Reanimate, Show and Tell, the Sorin decks, anything of that nature. We then have Mono Blue Belcher at 62%. So this is a Show and Tell Belcher kind of mashup. So Show and Tell, Omniscience, and then you have Fae to get you the combo. So Fae, Masterminds, 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 Bonds of Insight. And then you get back your Masterminds, gets approach second sun, gets approach second sun, win the game. You also have like the Belcher combo. You could just put into play Belcher, beat them that way there. And that you have no real lands because they're all the dual face cards, which play nicely with things like Commandeer, where you can steal your opponent's stuff. So a lot of kind of interesting lines here with the deck. One Rings in here. Sideboards into the Flood Maw as kind of cheap bounce interaction. Spell Pierce, Stern Scolding as cheap kind of counters. These are all your combo pieces, and then an Ugin just as a big over-the-top threat. We then have another Dimir. So this one's a Dimir Luris. So similar concepts to the other Dimir, a little bit more refined. The full mana drains, Drown in the Locks, Bowmasters, 3 Psychic Frogs, 4 Tamios. Interesting kind of split there. I would probably do 3-4. I just think Psychic Frog's so good. Only one Thoughtseize main, but just kind of disruptive deck, kind of tempo oriented. Sideboard gives you access to Bloodchief's Thirst for cheap removal. Again, the kind of Spell Pierce, Spell Snare, non-creature, creature kind of deck, so you can kind of attack it in that angle. Stone of Erich shuts off death triggers, so it's sacrifice decks, anything of that nature. Surgical for Graveyard Hate. You'll often see Demonic Tutor in these sideboards. Think of it as basically the second copy of any of your combo pieces or your sideboard pieces, given that, like, well, this could represent Surgical, this could represent Stone, whatever it may be. Supers with Meat Hook and Toxic Deluge. Moving on, we go to Jund Delirium. So this is a deck that's been popping up for a couple weeks now, 61%. Lurrus Shell with FOMO. If you're missing out, you get a loot effect. If your hand's empty, you just get a card draw. It's an enchantment creature on its own, so it helps contribute to that Delirium effect. And basically, add your combat. You can untap a creature, you get an additional combat step. So you can do stuff just like put through a bunch of damage. Patchwork Beastie is an artifact that kind of pulls through. There's no start of combat things like Forge, like you sometimes see in Standard or Pioneer. Artifact creature, 3/3 reasonable body, also helps kind of contribute to Nethergoyf's stats. DRC also takes advantage of the Delirium. So you're just kind of a tempo-oriented hand hate. Various cheap removal threats that kind of come in, free spells with like Once Upon a Time, Mishra's Bauble to fill your graveyard. Pick your poison, artifact enchantment, and flying hate. Really flexible card. Pyroclasm for the energy decks. Whirling Vortex for show and tell, and Unlicensed Source for graveyard. Very clean sideboard. Well, just in time, more Dimir. So this was another take on Dimir, 60% win rate. So this is a non-Lurrus version that's doing a couple self-mill elements again. So Oculus in here. You have the Unearth package, a lot of cheap disruption. So it's just deciding if you want to be the Oculus deck, kind of free drop reanimate kind of package, or do you want to be a little bit smaller and play with the Lurrus, a little bit more tempo control shell with like Nethergoyf. Again, a lot of the same cards that we've seen, Glistening Deluge being their choice of sweeper for the energy. Then a deck that's been picking up popularity is the Orzhov Belcher deck. So this deck can win on turn 1. Ali Eldrazi has a clip on his Twitter. I was watching him yesterday. He was playing it. Missman was playing this too. So the new card we got, Sacrifice. There's an additional cost to cast a spell, sack a creature. You add black mana equal to its mana cost. So you have this one not playing. Okay, so actually interesting because this one is not playing the there's the 15/15 where, or 15 mana 7/7 where it costs less based on your life. And it basically costs 2 mana in the deck. You just kind of keep dealing damage to yourself through things like Necrodominance and Necropotence. You can reanimate that generates a whole bunch of mana. In lieu of it, you basically, with this version here, you have the Sorin Elenda lines, but you can evoke Grief and then sacrifice it to get 4 mana, which then lets you catch Belcher on turn 1. If you have enough rituals, you can also that way there, and then kind of win through means. Otherwise, like kind of an evoke deck. It's got the Sorin plan, it's got the Belcher plan all mixed in. Practice Protection, Duresse's Hand Hate, Leyline for discard effects, Fragment, March, just cheap removal options. This helps with the life gain from like the Necros. Defense Grid against heavy counter spells, Graveyard Hate, and lastly, not the highest win rate, but just showing off something, especially for those who are looking for a deck that they got their Leylines banned in Standard Best of 1. This is Leyline Gruul, so a lot of standard legal cards here, or kind of Pioneer. Built around Leyline, doubling up your targeted spells. We have something like Scale Up that can just increase the base power toughness to 6/4. Any sort of prowess or stuff stacks on top. Then you have Monstrous Rage, Ancestral Anger is ways to push through the trample. Scamp can fling itself at your opponent. You have Snake Skin and Blossoming Defense's protection effects as well. Then Violent Urge, if you have Delirium, gives double strike. Kind of assemble your own Ember Cleave. Arena Glory can haste out some of your red. Crypt for Graveyard Hate also helps with the artifact count. Lightning Bolt is cheap removal. Pick your poison again, as mentioned. Flexible, multi-modular spell. Veil for protection. Vexing Bauble for show and tell. Pyroclasm for the energy decks. Then Shield Smash destroys an artifact, so it can deal with Belcher. It's also split second, so they can't activate Belcher in response. And in a pinch, just another pump spell for creatures. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing and what do you think of the format right now, where it stands in terms of the decks and the metagame and stuff like that. Curious to see what people think. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one and stay